When it comes to statin medications, people seem to fall into two camps. They're a miracle drug for heart disease, or they're a poison. There's very little nuance, there's very little in between. But I want to add some nuance to this conversation because so many of my patients take statins and people need statins, and it's not my job to tell you whether you should or shouldn't take it. And in fact, statins are the most common medication for high cholesterol. And because so many of my patients use them and they do impact blood sugar, we need to find ways of mitigating that. And that is what I want to talk about. So let me be clear. Statin medications like Lipitor are the cornerstone of the standard of care for cardiovascular disease, right? Love them or hate them, that's how it is. And my goal isn't to tell you to stop or start them, but my goal is to help you understand how to mitigate potential risks of taking a medication that might otherwise have some benefits for you. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And so what I want to talk about is this article, and this is not a new article. It's from 2023, but I keep coming back to it because it's a study that first confirmed indeed that statins can disrupt glucose levels in as little as 4 weeks, or it disrupts, it gives you some insulin resistance in as little as 4 weeks. So you can see from these numbers here that in 4 weeks, LDL and total cholesterol levels come down, which is why the person went on statins in the first place. But also, you see in 4 weeks, an increase in insulin levels and a reduction in GLP-1. So, what does that mean? So, there is an increase in insulin and an increase in metrics of insulin resistance. So, that's the stage 1 for developing diabetes for most people. But the GLP-1, unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know that GLP-1 is it's kind of our natural weight loss drug, which is a weird way of saying it. It's our natural Ozempic. So if it's lowering GLP-1, it's setting us up for blood sugar problems and weight problems. And before you think, I'm going to stop this video, I'm not going on statins, keep listening because the researchers, yay science, didn't stop there. They went searching for the mechanism. And that is where I think you're going to be really interested and where there's some news that you can use. So, how does it happen? And you might think, well, statins get in the way of blood sugar because they lower GLP-1. But how do they lower GLP-1? You know, you have to keep going back and back and back because somewhere in there you could find a little nugget. And that is what I think we found. What they show is that the statin appeared to reduce the diversity of healthy gut bacteria. They reduce the diversity of the microbiome. So, step back. What this means is, first, a more diverse microbiome, lots of different bacteria, is associated with better health outcomes and better metabolic health, as long as you don't get the pathogenic stuff in there that makes you sick. So if you restrict it to fewer species, that's associated with poorer health. And that's what they saw with the statin, is the statin reduced the diversity of species in the gut. And specifically, they zeroed in on the Clostridium species. And there's a few different, Clostridia species. That's why it was plural. But these Clostridia, which is a gut microbiome inhabitant, that is a species that's associated with good metabolic health, good blood sugar control, amongst other ones. It's one of the players, so don't get too hung up on it. This is what they studied. So put in the statin, which they used Lipitor, and they saw a reduction in the diversity of gut bacteria. Specifically, they saw a reduction in Clostridia species. And then lower GLP-1, lower insulin sensitivity. And at 16 weeks, I saw an increase in A1C. That came up later. So blood sugar did go up. So statin reduces diversity of gut bacteria, impairs GLP-1, messes with your blood sugar management system. That's not what you want. So the mechanism by which this happens, I'll just touch on lightly because I think some of you will just go read the article and some of you will be like, I don't need to know that. Just tell me the punchline. These bacteria, like Clostridia, they're responsible for taking your bile acids, what's produced by your gallbladder, these bile acids, and they convert them to secondary bile acids like UDCA, And these secondary bile acids, they impact your ability to produce GLP-1. So scientists were able to mitigate this whole blood sugar problem. So give someone statins, causes blood sugar problems, or give someone statins and then interfere, and we don't have the problem. The way they interfered with this whole problem pathway is they found they could replace the Clostridia, basically give the mice a probiotic, just like we take probiotics. If they replace the bacteria, things seem to be fine. So that's good news. But also they were able to replace a secondary bile acid that wasn't getting produced. I think that was UDCA. So they're seeing that there's the connection there. But let's go back to that bacteria. So let's say you're taking a statin, because this is the news you can use. Say you're taking a statin and you're like, you need, maybe your lipids are sky high, maybe you have familial hypercholesterolemia, and you otherwise feel fine on this medication. Maybe you improve your microbiome. And how do you do that? Maybe by taking probiotics, which are the, bacteria in the little bottles and little pills. You eat probiotic food, which is things with bacteria like yogurt, like kimchi, like sauerkraut, those kinds of fermented foods. And you eat the food that the bacteria thrive on. And that's things like fiber, but not just fiber. Things like fermentable fibers, fibers that your bacteria will eat, grow, and thrive and multiply. There's a wide variety of those foods. I won't go into them now, but the more variety of foods you feed your microbiome, that you eat, the wider variety of species you have in there. It just goes to show, and we know diversity is king when it comes to the gut microbiome and so much more. So feed it that fiber, feed it a variety of fibers and colors that help influence it, and the probiotic and probiotic foods. So those are important things. And that is your one take home from this that I want you to take. Gut health is important, and to take care of your microbiome. Definitely if you're on a statin. Also, if you're not on a statin. But the other one is the labs you get done, the metrics. It is not enough to track your A1C and fasting blood sugar once a year at your annual appointment. That is inadequate. If you want to track and make sure you're not progressing in insulin resistance, there are other blood markers to track. When I have one of the things I do with my patients is we'll look at their standard metrics and go and just fill in the gaps and order them a few other labs. They're not expensive labs. They're not exotic labs. They're just the basic things your lab is running anyways, but no one seemed to order them for you. And they're tracking your metrics for insulin resistance, right? So you want to get those tracked. You want to get those monitored. And I talk about this extensively in my upcoming book, Hack Your Blood Sugar. It'll be out in January 2026. We talk about all of these things that influence your blood sugar, including medications, but how to mitigate that, and importantly, what labs you should be monitoring and how to get those ordered. Okay? So thank you for listening. And if you have a friend or loved one who's taking a statin, you probably do, or might be interested, please share this with them, because this is information that they could use. We are not trying to say, take the statin, don't take the statin. Statins are bad, statins are great. Let's just be middle of the road and give information to people so that you can make the right decision for yourself. Okay? All right. So thank you for listening.